Right, good morning. Jim Paul, I've been in the real estate business for probably 30 years, and I actually own the company ALPS Group in regards to my background's engineering, paralegal. I've started 7 businesses, da, da, da. So we work in the receivership throughout the country.
And I'm Rick Levin, and I have been in the real estate and personal property auction business for 38 years and have sold, uh, I've sold over 30,000 pieces of real estate, and I've done office buildings, shopping centers, homes, townhomes, condos. I've sold horses, I've sold cab medallions, I've sold 54,000 pounds of smoked frozen scallops. And they've been for government entities and banks and wealthy people and poor people and divorcing couples and all types of interesting situations all over the United States and a little bit in Europe and the Caribbean.
In regards to the industry itself, one of the things that we're seeing is the refinancing is not favorable. The also that I'm seeing throughout the country is softening on property values. There are some hot markets. The other thing is that we're seeing the maturity of commercial real estate loans coming due in 27, probably about 2 trillion. In 25, 26, we're seeing probably about 1 trillion. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities in regards to receivership. And unfortunately for the people that are borrowers, but fortunately for the receivers in regards to it, but quite a changing market.
Yeah, and I do anticipate with the change in the U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman, there will probably be a downward trend on short-term interest rates, which will help some people who want to borrow money. But many of the assets that they want to borrow money against have gone down in value. The poster child for that are probably office buildings, where there's probably been a lot of extend and pretend because of COVID and remote work. Businesses aren't wanting to pay as much for rent, and they certainly are not taking as much space, the law firms, the accounting firms, and all the rest. As far as retail shopping centers, that has been in somewhat of a unusual situation for many years because of Amazon and remote shopping. And then, of course, there's other advances going on right now, niche categories, even things like parking garages, of all things, might be disrupted due to autonomous driving cars. So there's a lot of interesting things coming down the pike here in the case of the value of assets around the world.
One of the things that was like a stimulus was COVID. When we got COVID, everything went inside in regards to that, and that's where Amazon really took advantage of it. So now we're seeing a lot of these big boxes as distribution facilities versus manufacturing. Even though our president is talking about bringing manufacturing back to the States, we're seeing more online purchases versus, going to stores. Even the big shopping malls are trying to reinvent themselves as well. So Simon, who's a big mall producer, is having problems in regards to some of the properties throughout the country. Rick, we want to talk about as an example, maybe the cannabis facility.
Sure. Um, you know, uh, we have a very interesting situation right now that I'm involved with Jim. Jim is the receiver on a warehouse that was approved for a grow facility for cannabis. Um, However, the municipality that the building is in only grants that permission not to the building, but to the actual owner of the building once that owner has been vetted that they're an appropriate person to be allowed to grow cannabis. Well, that person, for whatever reason, stopped paying all of their bills on the building, and the building has gone into receivership. And Jim's the receiver, and I am conducting an auction or at least a sale to identify potential buyers, and then the court will decide if the property will actually be sold to them. The problem comes in is that the cannabis industry itself is going through a lot of issues here in the United States. It is federally illegal. It's legal state by state. And we have to do this auction where we find a buyer who either wants the building for non-cannabis use. Unfortunately, the value might be lower, which is not a great situation for all the stakeholders who want us to sell it for top dollar. Or we have to find a cannabis user who hopefully will pay a higher price. But then once we find that person, then that person still has to be approved not only by the court, but also by the municipality that this building is in. And if one of those two entities doesn't approve that person, then we got to start all over again or go back to other bidders. And it brings in a very challenging situation because one of the many factors, for example, is that right now in the state of Illinois, if you're growing cannabis, you must do it indoors. But there is a big movement afoot in other states that have even allowed people to grow cannabis outside. If you can grow cannabis outside, that will probably hurt the value of the buildings that are now potentially set up to grow cannabis inside because it's cheaper to grow outside. You get the sun, you don't need artificial lighting and all the rest. So we're dealing with a very timely and somewhat perilous situation with a lot of variables here. And so what I'm doing with Jim is we're navigating how to do this timely, safely, and to maximize the sales price of the asset. And it's causing us to be really thoughtful and clever and communicate with not only the municipality, not only the court, but obviously with potential buyers.
And one thing to basically comment on what Rick talked about is we have to have the creativity, especially when you get into the specialty type industries, and cannabis is one of them. These properties or these industries have regulatory obligations that they must meet, whether they're state or federal, and then requirements too. Not every buyer is qualified to buy a cannabis facility, and that could apply to other types of product types, whether it's real estate or different receivership type cases.
Yeah, and I maybe left out a very crucial part of our story, and this is something that I'll be doing with Jim in the next 90 days, and that is this building is only partially complete.
Yeah.
So that opens up a whole Pandora's box of how much of the electrical and of the plumbing has already been completed. Has it been completed appropriately? And how much more money is it going to cost to finish the plumbing and the electrical and the lighting? And so then you really have to, and Jim's background in construction comes into play. The buyers, of course, will be savvy, but we have to somewhat inform them and guide them as to what they need to do. And to that end, we asked the municipality where the property is located if they could open up their files for us, which they've done, to show us all the approvals that at least they granted during the part of the construction that's already been completed. So it's a pretty daunting task to get to the finish line here.
Yeah, it's not just let's appoint a receiver, and this is going to lead into our next question, and we'll talk about the qualifications, but all these properties, whether they're real estate or they're trust or any type of litigation case in regards to it, it's almost like their specialty. It's not like you assume a receivership, you move forward on the procedures, you work through maybe a foreclosure, and it's over. You have to put your thinking cap on. It does challenge your thinking, but the receiver has to have a high level of qualifications to do this. Well, I've seen them both. I've seen more of the so-so receiver, and usually when I'm in court and I'm talking with attorneys, they share their frustrations in regards to it. It's not every receiver's the same in regards to it. And I tell people when we're speaking at these engagements or conferences, you really have to check out their statement of qualifications. They need to be experienced. If it's real estate, they need to be experienced in somewhat the building industry, understand the procedures, or have the mechanism in place where the team that supports the receiver can basically handle it in an expert fashion. Also, you need to have financial awareness in regards to it. We're trying to maximize every receivership possible in regards to what we can sell these properties for if the court allows us. Not every state and not every situation we have the opportunity to sell the property unless we ask for that or make that request to the judge in the court. Well, and we'll lead in, I use Rick because he does auctions and brokerage in regards to it, but and we got a couple of examples that we'll talk about in regards to it, but again, every situation is different. Not everyone is suitable for an auction. Not everyone is suitable for listing. So we have to basically put on our thinking caps and, look at the property and look at the situation and look at the market too. The market may demand, that you do an auction, but, Rick can comment in regards to the choices. And we do have a couple that we just got through with on an auction and actually on a brokerage.
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons. One of the issues, though, is as a receiver, and I don't want to put words in Jim's mouth, receiverships can go on for 6 months or they can go on for 6 years. And there's usually a bunch of stakeholders that want closure, including usually a court that doesn't want to just keep that out there forever. And one thing about an auction that's nice is you can kind of create an urgency, a deadline for action. And that usually is welcomed by everybody as long as everybody feels that the eventual sales price of whatever these assets are was commercially reasonable, which then ironically lends itself to an auction because it's almost like speak now or forever hold your peace. If you tell as many people as possible that you're selling this asset and you give them ample time to do their investigation and you give them as much information as you have and you have them all bidding on an equal playing field, it's a pretty good way to get to a finish line. And it's somewhat difficult for one of the parties to say that wasn't fair versus selling it in a private treaty negotiation. Somebody could slip in there and get it, whatever the asset is, at a price, and someone could then be a Monday morning quarterback and say, gee, I would have given you more. I wish I knew you were selling it. There's some assets, though, that are just so complicated that they require negotiations. And even with the auction method, we have found ourselves in negotiation situations. And I guess, Jim, this is probably a good example to talk about the motor garage. If it's okay. We had a property that was it was in a subdivision where they built high-end garages for men and women to park their typically high-end vehicles. It wasn't a house, it was where they got to park their vehicles. And we had one that was in a receivership that Jim was handling. And in this instance, we were selling 3 of them combined. And it was very unusual because there really weren't a lot of 3 combined, 3 garages all combined. So we got offers, and the consensus that we came to was that maybe the pieces are worth more than the whole. So with Jim's construction background and with the court's approval, the dollars were allocated so Jim could take these 3 garages and put them back into 3 garages, thus lowering the sales price we would need for each, thus opening up the world to a lot more buyers. But the end result, even after Jim would do the construction, would be a net higher sales price to the estate of this case. So we started down that road. Jim hired architects, we got permits. Of course, the court was involved and the court gave approval for all this. There was some dollars expended. And then one of the parties that had been interested all along finally said, stop doing that. I secretly really like it the way it is, and I will pay more money. And that's what they did. And so early on, about 6 months into it, after we had spent the dollars, the party came in, a wealthy party, and purchased the whole asset. And so we were prepared to go either way, but you
Yeah.
had to have your thinking cap on, and that resulted in a successful sale and closing of the situation.
And in regards to this one too, is that we look at it where we can maximize the return on this because there was much more money put in by the defendant. And so the court likes to hear good news, and the good news is that we had a different approach to basically divide these units up and sell them for a little bit more each. But as Rick stated, that we got a buyer that saw what was happening and said, you know what, I want to buy this. Why waste your time, our time? I'm going to buy the 3 units from you, and we'll come to an agreed price in regards to it. So, even though we hired an architect to subdivide the 3, which minimum cost, it actually helps stimulate the market to bring people to the table to close at a higher value in a shorter amount of time. So, what that tells us in receivership, it's not you just get a property, you put it into the market to sell. You really have to think about the situation, all the parameters that are around it, and what is the best way to maximize the value. Those are key.